Behind Giza's granite door, a blocked shaft records a locked passage the public translation avoids. Inside the Great Pyramid, high in the Queen's Chamber wall, a tunnel too narrow for a man runs into darkness. Public descriptions put it at about 20 centimeters square. It climbs through the stone, bends out of sight, and ends at a small blocking slab with copper fittings set into its face. The official explanation calls it symbolic, a ventilation shaft that never ventilated, a ritual star passage aimed toward the sky, a feature made for the king's soul, even though it opens from the queen's chamber and stops behind stone. But the hidden inscription and the temple door wording point in another direction. They appear to describe a closed way, a managed barrier, and a sequence of access behind a stone door. Rudolf Gantenbrink's Upuaut robot reached that barrier in 1993. The National Geographic Pyramid rover drilled through it in 2002 and saw another block beyond. The Jedi project returned in 2011 and recorded red marks behind the first door. That is the problem. The shaft is blocked like a passage, marked like a passage, and still treated as symbol. The archive record gets sharper at the first line. The setting is the Giza Plateau, inside the Great Pyramid, where the Queen's Chamber sits below the better-known King's Chamber and Grand Gallery. Two narrow shafts leave the Queen's Chamber, one to the north and one to the south. For centuries, they were not open passages. Their lower mouths stayed hidden until 19th century clearing work exposed them. The southern shaft became the critical one because a machine could enter where no human body could. In 1993, German engineer Rudolf Gantenbrink sent a small robot called Upuaut into the shaft. The name came from the ancient Egyptian opener of ways, a detail that became almost too exact for what the camera found. The robot climbed the tight channel. The walls pressed close around it. The camera showed a clean, sloping stone duct with no room for a worker, no room for storage, and no obvious use as an ordinary corridor. Then the machine reached a flat blocking slab set across the shaft. Public descriptions often call the slab limestone. Some reports describe its finish as granite-like because the face looks dense, deliberate, and door-like under the robot light. On that face were two copper fittings, one on each side, placed like handles, pins, clamps, or symbolic pulls. The exact function remains disputed, but the object exists because a machine filmed it. It is not a legend added by a later storyteller. It is not a mythic door painted on a wall. It is a physical barrier inside the pyramid, reached by a robot, recorded on video, and placed where a simple air shaft should not need a locked face. After that, the public record became uneven. Gantenbrink's footage made the door famous, but access to the shaft did not become open scientific ground. The find was caught inside permissions, broadcast rights, ministry decisions, and tightly controlled follow-up work. In 2002, the Pyramid rover, working in a National Geographic event, drilled a small hole through the first slab. A camera looked through. The expected open void did not appear. Another blocking stone stood a short distance beyond it. That second block changed the problem. One door can be dismissed as a symbolic terminus. Two barriers in sequence begin to look like a planned access system. In 2011, the Jedi project sent a later robot into the same southern shaft. Its camera looked behind the first blocking stone and recorded red markings on the floor or wall surfaces beyond the slab. The marks were not a full public translation. They were fragments seen in a restricted zone, beyond a drilled hole, inside a shaft still not cleared. This is why the object is not ordinary public evidence. A visitor cannot stand before it. A researcher cannot simply walk up and test the corridor. The door is known through machines, edited images, official permissions, and partial publication. The first register gives the mechanism before it gives the mystery. In Egyptian temple language, a door is rarely only decoration. Door leaves, bolts, thresholds, and sealed rooms appear in ritual scenes, but they also carry administrative meaning. A door can mark controlled entry. A bolt can mark closure. A guarded threshold can mark who may pass, when it may open, and which chamber lies behind it. That is where the hidden inscription matters. The wording tied to the shaft tradition has been treated as sacred architecture, star symbolism, or royal passage language. But read beside temple door signs, it behaves less like a poem and more like an access record. A determinative marker is the quiet clue. In hieroglyphic writing, a determinative is usually not spoken aloud. It tells the reader what category a word belongs to. One sign can classify a word as a physical object. Another can classify it as a place. Another can tell the reader that the word concerns motion, sealing, guarding, or a divine scene. That matters because the phrase connected to the blocked shaft does not behave like empty sky language. Its signs point toward a closed way, a barrier, and a managed passage behind stone. In plain terms, the writing appears to say there is a way. The way is shut, and the shut state is part of the design. Temple door scenes at Abydos and Karnak show the same logic in stone. A god or king stands before a threshold. A bolt sign appears near the door leaves. A keeper, priest, or guardian figure controls the moment of opening. In ceremonial terms, that is sacred access. In administrative terms, it is a rule for passage. Those two readings do not fight each other. Sacred rooms were managed rooms. Temple doors were opened, closed, sealed, washed, guarded, and recorded. The ritual language did not remove the mechanics, it preserved them. So when the Great Pyramid shaft is explained only as a symbolic star route, one part of the record is left outside the frame. A star route does not require copper fittings. A symbolic breath channel does not require a second stone behind the first. A ritual endpoint does not easily explain red markings beyond the barrier. The hidden line is the one that turns the symbol into a procedure. Door, bolt, closed way, keeper, passage. That is not a fantasy translation. It is how Egyptian writing often works. It places the visible sign beside a category marker, then lets the trained reader know whether the word belongs to an object, an action, a place, or a sacred event. If the shaft inscription is read through that system, the door is more than an image of transition. It becomes a technical marker for controlled access. The copper-fitted slab becomes the stone version of the same idea. The second block becomes the next locked point in the sequence. The wording behaves less like myth. It behaves like a protocol. The translation would be interesting on its own, but the shaft gives it a physical test. The Southern Queen's Chamber shaft gives that test in stone. Its geometry is too tight for normal passage. Its mouth begins in a chamber that official history does not treat as the final burial room. Its course rises through the pyramid core. Then it stops at a fitted slab with two copper pieces placed into its face. Those copper fittings are the detail that refuses to go quiet. If the slab were only a plug, the fittings would be unnecessary. If the shaft were only a symbolic line toward the stars, The fittings would be theatrical in a place no living worshiper could see. If the channel were only a failed ventilation duct, the second blocking stone becomes harder to explain. The better engineering analogy is a sealed inspection conduit. In a modern building, a narrow service line may not be made for human travel. It may carry a cable, a probe, air, sound, measurement, or access to a hidden fitting. It can still have a cover. It can still have a locked plate. It can still be segmented so that opening one barrier does not expose the whole route. The Queen's Chamber shaft looks more like that than a simple pipe. Narrow channel, marker door, copper fittings, inner stop, red markings beyond, unread public file. The 2002 drilling made the sequence visible. The first barrier was not the back wall of the system. A small hole pierced it. The camera looked through. Behind the slab was a small continuation space, and then another blocking stone. That short distance matters. It means the first door was not merely the end, it was a threshold. Something was placed beyond it, and that something was also blocked. The Jedi robot added a second layer. Behind the first barrier, the camera recorded red marks. Some observers described them as quarry marks, construction marks, or unknown signs. They were not presented as a complete inscription that solved the shaft, but they show that the zone behind the first block was not blank in the way a meaningless void should be blank. The physical signature has 4 parts. The channel is planned. The first door is fitted. The space behind it continues. The second barrier stops the route again. That is controlled access in stone. The official symbolic explanation can absorb 1 or 2 of those facts. It can say the shaft had religious meaning. It can say the copper fittings were symbolic handles. It can say the second block was another ritual closure. Taken together, though, the facts form a mechanical sequence. A real shaft leads to a real barrier. A drilled barrier reveals another barrier. A robot records markings between them. The final continuation remains unresolved. The standard translation asks the viewer to treat the shaft as an idea. The stone asks to be treated as a device. This does not mean it was a hallway for people. The 20-centimeter width argues against that. It means the builders may have designed an access line for something smaller than a person. A probe, a sealing element, a ritual instrument, a measuring line, a removable object, a concealed connection. The word passage does not always mean human travel. In engineering, a passage can be a channel for force, air, sound, sight, alignment, material, or instruction. The key is whether it connects one controlled point to another. The Queen's Chamber shaft does. The same access pattern appears where the public story says it should not. The Great Pyramid already contains known systems of blocked movement. Above the ascending passage, before the King's Chamber, the builders used granite portcullis stones in the antechamber. These were not decorative slabs. They were sliding barriers, fitted into grooves, meant to control entry into the most restricted interior zone. The antechamber shows that the builders understood staged closure. Stone could be held, lowered, locked, and made part of the architectural logic. Granite was not placed only for beauty. It was placed where resistance mattered. That does not prove the Queen's Chamber shaft was a human passage. It proves that controlled access was part of the pyramid's design vocabulary. A blocked route inside the Great Pyramid is not a foreign idea to the structure. It is one of its known habits. Temple scenes carry the same vocabulary in image form. At Abydos, Carved doors and ritual thresholds appear with bolts, guardians, and formal opening scenes. At Karnak, sacred rooms are shown as managed spaces, not casual rooms. The point is not that those temples built the Great Pyramid. The point is that Egyptian sacred architecture repeatedly described access as something controlled by signs, barriers, and authorized opening. Old Kingdom tomb and temple language also records doors in administrative terms. False doors, sealed rooms, offering chambers, and storerooms were not random decoration. They marked where offerings moved, where names were read, where restricted space began, and where passage was allowed only under rule. The shaft door fits that older habit. The difference is that the Great Pyramid places the managed threshold inside a narrow channel, hidden in masonry, beyond the reach of the public eye. That is why the temple door comparison matters. If a carved door on a temple wall can preserve access language, a copper-fitted barrier inside a pyramid shaft can preserve access engineering. The image and the object speak the same grammar. Door leaves mark a boundary. Bolt signs mark closure. Keeper language marks authority. A blocked shaft marks the physical enforcement of the rule. Seen this way, the Queen's Chamber door is not an isolated curiosity. It belongs to a family of Egyptian access systems. Granite barriers in the pyramid, guarded thresholds in temple reliefs, sealed ways in administrative wording, and restricted chambers that were opened only by procedure. The public story separates these pieces. It treats the shaft as symbol, the copper as ritual, the red marks as uncertain, and the second stone as another oddity. The archive reading puts them back into one sequence. A locked passage does not have to be large. It has to be controlled. The record does not fail at the engineering. It fails at access. The oldest gate in the timeline is the builder's own seal. At some point during construction, the southern shaft of the Queen's Chamber was left closed behind a fitted blocking stone. Whether the slab was installed from the inside, set from above, or sealed during a construction phase remains debated. But the final result is plain. The route was closed before any modern investigator reached it. 19th century and 20th century pyramid investigators mapped chambers, passages, air shafts, relieving spaces, and structural blocks. They argued over function and chronology. Yet the Queen's Chamber shafts remained a special problem because they did not behave like normal vents. They were narrow. They were hidden at the chamber end. They did not open directly to the outside in the way the King's Chamber shafts do. Then came 1993. Gantenbrink's Upuat robot moved through the southern shaft and brought back the image of the door. That footage should have made the next question simple. What lies behind it? Instead, the question became political, institutional, and controlled. Reports from the period describe disagreement over permissions, announcement rights, project authority, and who had the right to continue the work. The object was inside Egypt's most famous monument. No independent team could simply return with a drill and open it. Every movement required approval. In 2002, the Pyramid rover drilled the small hole. That act did not settle the matter. It made the matter sharper. The camera saw a second stone beyond the first, and the public received another fragment instead of a completed passage test. The strongest reveal is not that a door was found. The strongest reveal is that the first door was not the final stop. A single slab can be called symbolic. A second blocking stone beyond a drilled door means the builders anticipated continuation. They built a line that could be interrupted, checked, and blocked again. The Jedi project in 2011 added images from behind the first barrier. including red marks seen in the hidden space. Again, the result was partial. The world did not receive a cleared route, a full close-range survey of the second block, or a final answer about what lies beyond the inner stop. The public has seen pieces: a narrow shaft, a copper-fitted door, a drill hole, red marks, a second block. What it has not seen is the completed test of the passage logic. That is where the modern gate mirrors the ancient one. The builders controlled the shaft with stone. Modern institutions control it with permits, project selection, image release, conservation rules, and official caution. Conservation is a real concern. The Great Pyramid cannot be treated like a broken wall in an abandoned quarry. Drilling, dust, vibration, and air changes can damage ancient surfaces. Any serious engineer understands that. But caution does not erase the access problem. It defines it. If the final space beyond the inner block has not been publicly resolved, then the symbolic explanation has not earned its final word. The blocked shaft proves a passage system was anticipated. It does not prove what the passage ultimately reaches. That difference matters. This is where the unanswered question becomes current. Let me be clear. I am not saying the shaft leads to treasure, a royal body, or a supernatural chamber. Those claims are not needed. The evidence is already strong enough without them. What the record shows is narrower and more important. A hidden shaft inside the Great Pyramid ends at a fitted blocking stone. The stone carries copper elements. A drilled opening revealed another stone beyond it. Later robot work recorded markings behind the first barrier. Temple door language and sealed passage wording give a known Egyptian grammar for closed ways, bolts, keepers, and controlled access. The supported implication is not that the full passage is known. It is that the standard symbolic explanation leaves too much physical evidence outside the frame. A star passage can explain direction. It cannot easily explain a sequence of mechanical stops. A ritual shaft can explain sacred intention. It cannot erase the copper fittings, the inner block, and the red marks beyond the first door. A ventilation theory fails even faster because the shaft was blocked and hidden. The stronger reading is that the Queen's Chamber shaft preserves a designed access system inside the pyramid. It may have been symbolic and technical at the same time. Egyptian sacred architecture often worked that way. Ritual did not cancel engineering. It gave engineering a protected language. That is why the temple door inscription matters. It does not have to name a modern lock. It has to preserve the logic of a shut way, a barrier, an opening procedure, and a space beyond. The object is still there. Behind the Queen's Chamber wall, the shaft still climbs into the pyramid. The granite door, or limestone door with granite-like authority, still closes the line. The copper fittings still sit on its face. The drilled hole still marks the moment modern machines crossed the first threshold. The second stone still waits beyond that opening. The red marks behind the first barrier remain one of the most important details in the file. They are small. They are easy to minimize. But they exist in the exact zone where the official story wants an endpoint. They sit behind the door, inside the continuation space, before the next block. That is why the opening sentence matters. Behind Giza's granite door, a blocked shaft records a locked passage the public translation avoids. The hidden inscription does not need to shout. It only needs to classify the signs correctly. Door, bolt, keeper, closed way, passage behind stone. When those words are placed beside the robot footage, the shaft stops behaving like a loose symbol. It becomes a physical record of access. Not access for tourists, not access for a living worker crawling through the pyramid. Controlled access in the Egyptian sense, marked, sealed, governed, and hidden behind a barrier. The Great Pyramid already teaches that lesson in its larger passages. Granite portcullis blocks protected the king's chamber approach. The antechamber used sliding stone to control movement. The builders knew how to interrupt a route with heavy material and make the interruption part of the design. The queen's chamber shaft repeats the same idea in miniature: a small route, a fitted stop, a continuation, a second stop. The difference is that the miniature system is harder to inspect. Its scale protects it. Its location protects it. Its official meaning protects it even more. If the shaft is only symbolic, then the final test should not be dangerous to the explanation. More imaging, clearer publication, and a completed survey beyond the second block would only strengthen the accepted view. But if the shaft is a controlled passage record, then every new centimeter matters. The unresolved measurement is simple. What lies beyond the second stone? Is there another small void, another mark, another fitting, another turn, or a final chamber surface? Until that space is fully resolved in the public record, the file remains open. If forbidden ancient history belongs in the evidence file, subscribe to Hidden Nile Archives. The Great Pyramid does not ask for belief. It leaves stone, copper, marks, and blocked distance. The public translation can call the shaft a star route. The engineering record still shows a door, and behind that door, the passage has not finished speaking.